never laugh as a hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in bloody sheets to drop you 6 feet underneath. They put you in a pine wood box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. It all goes well for about a week, and then your coffin begins to leak, and the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out, the worms play pinochle on your snout. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose as you begin to decompose. A slimy beetle with demon's eyes chews through your stomach and out your sides. Your stomach turns to rancid grease, and pus pours out like melted cheese. You spread it on a slice of bread, and that's what you'll eat when you're dead. And the worms crawl out, the worms crawl in, the worms that crawl in are lean and thin, the ones that crawl out are fat and stout. Your eyes fall in and your hair falls out. Your brain turns into maggot pie, your liver starts to liquefy, and for the living all is well as you sink further into hell. And the flames rise up to drag you down into the fire where you will drown. Your skin melts off as you descend, and Satan tears you limb from limb. Your suffering will never end. And the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. They'll eat your guts and then shit them out. And when your bones begin to rot, the worms remain, but you do not. So don't ever laugh as a hearse goes by, for someday you'll be the one to die. And when death brings his cold despair, ask yourself, will anyone care? Don't ever laugh as a hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap
All right, how you guys doing?
sheets to drop you 6 feet underneath. They put
See who all we got in here. So we got Devin, Big Ink Beast Gamer Dog. How are you doing? Holy shit! Welcome. I don't believe I've seen you in here before. What's going on, Alessandra? What's going on, Paris? Again, some good games on Dead by Daylight with the Switch. I mean, granted, I do have the Switch Lite, so trying to view everything through that tiny ass screen when I'm used to like the big monitors that I have now, or my now 65-inch screen TV that I play Xbox on. But good enough, good enough in any sense. I mean, once I get my adapter to be able to play with my Xbox controller, I'll be able to play a whole lot better than what I did. But hey, I didn't die at all in the 3 rounds that we played. What's going on, Jason Smith? Let's talk about me instead. Hey, we're talking about Jason in generals across the land. Thank you for adding the vibe check emoji. Now I can vibe check everyone. Welcome, Alessandro. What's going on, Chuck? What's going on, Anthony? Why did I text you back? Because I am quite busy, my friend. I am working on many things. I will pretty much check to see if I got any messages on Instagram, and I try to get back to them when I can. I am not saying that I will answer. I will answer immediately. So if I don't answer you, don't take it personally. It's just that I'm busy. Did we forget I'm here? I noticed you, Jason. I said something about you. What's going on, Garrett? I'm a much better killer. I don't know. What's your body count like? Have to check the numbers. What's Jason are we talking about? You, Jason? Or Jason Voorhees? I mean, aren't we all one and the same? We are all part of the Jason collective. Like, we are Jason. We are Legion. Any news about when you'll be going back to work, JG? As far as I know, probably, judging by the way things are going, maybe not until late June, early July. Yes, I seen the picture you sent me, Anthony. I have not been able to check it out for myself yet. But I know it's there. I've acknowledged I've seen it, but I just haven't checked it out. What's going on, Kat? Count them myself, man. I don't want to do all that work. All right. Now, first and foremost of things that we are going to do for this stream, I do have another share portion of cosplays. This time, I believe most of the cosplays I shared from Paris, his Ash collection, have been mostly what? It's been mostly what, Paris? Like season 1 and kind of season 2 of Ash vs. Evil Dead. This time, I'm going with the ones... I was going to try to save it for the last episode because it was kind of concurrent with that episode, granted how Ash is dressed. But seeing how Paris is coming up on a lot of Friday the 13th stuff, figured why not just go with this and then sprinkle a couple of those Paris Ash cosplays throughout some of the other shares. Also got some other really good cosplayers as well. Some new people too. Mostly season 1. I figured. I don't think I've shared your post-apocalyptic one before, have I? What's going on, Brady? Maybe you could write a finishing story to the Friday the 13th franchise with a fan fiction. Have you heard one of my sequel ideas? Because I got a sequel that takes place after kind of takes place after part 6 or 7, because both of them are pretty much when Jason is in the lake and so forth. I wrote it based on it being a direct sequel to part 7, where Jason's clothes are all tattered up. The mask was split in half by Tina, and it takes place in the winter. This was something I did a couple years back when I first started the YouTube channel. Definitely feel free to check that out. It was in my mind, the beginning story of Jason coming back to form, and ultimately going to lean into a particular storyline where him and Pamela would become reunited, and that would end the death curse for Jason, but ultimately lead to a new death curse for someone else. Like, that's how I would end Jason's story, but I always felt like the death curse itself was something that was greatly immortal. So, like, pretty much now that Jason's story would be done, let's say Roy's story now comes about. What I think about the movie Event Horizon, I mean, it was good. I haven't seen it in quite a few years. I'm very interested ever since I saw the Mr. H reviews kind of thing where he says that, well, not says, but he theorizes, and I think the theory comes from elsewhere as well, that has some tie-in, not tie-ins, but very close similarities to Hellraiser, which I'm very interested in checking out to see if that is the case. I know I've been seeing some suggestions for more Child's Play theories. Which, I mean, there's some in there that I'm formulating, but the thing is, with most of my theories that I like to do, when I come up with a theory, I want it to be plausible and not just a knee-jerk kind of thing. Like, I see that, oh, there's that, what if this happened? Or what if this is connected to that? I want to actually take into account all the things that pretty much would be a domino effect. Like, if this actually is because of this, then how does it affect X, Y, and Z? And that's mostly how I thought. Like, when I thought of the Roy Burns being Jason's father theory. Now, the only thing that I've ever heard, argument-wise, from anybody about Roy being Jason's father, just based off the Pamela tapes about how Pamela was raped and everything, was, well, Roy's about the same age as Jason. Says who? When did it ever say in any of the Friday the 13th films exactly when Roy was born? Did it ever give his age? Well, he looks like, well, that's beyond the point. I mean, people age differently. Some people look like they're younger than what they are. Some people could be 30 and look like they're 15 years old. Like half of Hollywood. Not the well, Roy threw someone through a window. A guy that would be in his 60s wouldn't be able to do that. And then Halloween 2018 comes out, where Michael Myers is pinning people to walls and so forth. Like, all these arguments get shot down. I haven't seen anything definitively that says Roy is the same age as Jason. Until I see that, I feel like the theory still kind of stands. And that was what? That was my first entry into the dark theories too, wasn't it? Where, but Michael ain't human. Very true. Very true. At least for 2018, we don't know if he's supernatural or not. We don't know if that Michael has any kind of supernatural vibe to him. For all we know, he's just an extremely crazy mental patient that has the whole adrenaline kind of thing going on with him. But then again, we also look at Roy. What human you know is breaking through solid wood doors the way Roy was? What humans we know are taking tractors to the chest and still getting up? Oh, thank you for the follow, Muzzy7. I greatly appreciate it. Oh, we over there from D Live, my friend. Thank you. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, you look at all the damage that Roy took. It's very, very much similar to what Michael Myers has taken. And he didn't scream at all. Like, what human you know takes a tractor to the chest and doesn't scream? Like, that's what I'm saying. Oh, I'm good, Muzzy. I am good. How are you? How are you doing this fine evening as we talk all things Friday the 13th? You're Turkish. Oh, shit. Are you, like, over there in the country right now, or are you in the States, too? Because if you're over there, how is it over there? How are you guys doing? Does my same answer apply to potentially making a Scream theory or two? Typically, yes. I mean, I could do what if theories if that's what you guys want. I can do what if scenarios that are technically kind of like theories. I try to normally fill in the blanks with certain things that we don't know, but I can start leaning a whole lot more heavier into the what if scenarios if you guys want that, if you want it. I typically try to stay away from it because most what if scenarios are usually shot down in forums as well. That would never happen. That character would never act like that. So I usually try to keep it within the canon. But if you guys really want, I'll definitely start getting into what if scenarios, especially like with Child's Play, for instance. What if Chucky actually did take over Andy in Child's Play 1? Or what if Chucky actually succeeded in taking over Tyler? Those are some things that we could probably talk about. But also with those what if scenarios, would you guys want them live stream or would you want videos done? That'd be another thing too. What's going on, Machete? How you doing? JG versus The Rock. I mean, he'd drop an elbow on my ass and I'd be done. It'd be buttons and necklaces popping out, flying everywhere. Anthony says, how Creighton Duke know? I'm guessing he says, how does Creighton Duke know about Jason? We didn't see him in the Friday the 13th movies. That is, as I've stated before, Creighton Duke is only part of the New Line franchise. The New Line Friday the 13th movies, there are none. There are only New Line Jason movies. Friday the 13th is exclusively Paramount. That's what it is. That's why even when they did the reboot, Friday the 13th, they could not do that without the Paramount partnership with it. That was the only way they could do it. Now, they kind of squandered their chance because you get that with Paramount, but you don't use any of those characters when you're remaking anything outside of Pamela and Jason. You don't use a Tommy Jarvis. You don't use a Chris Higgins. You don't use a Jenny Field. You don't use any of these familiar names that could spark a lot of interest within your franchise. You just take the Friday the 13th name, you take Jason, you take Pamela, and you run with it. You basically made a New Line Jason movie with the Paramount Friday the 13th title. But to answer your question, before going on any kind of tirade like that, Anthony, Creighton Duke does not exist in the Paramount world. His backstory of what it was supposed to be with his girlfriend being killed by Jason never happens in the Paramount world. Ever. Never happens. At all. Never once ever happens. In the New Line world, Jason has a similar history, but things are flipped and changed differently. Like, he does get the hockey mask. He does go on killing sprees. He does get put down multiple times. But things happen differently enough to where Jason possibly was supernatural a lot earlier in the New Line timeline as opposed to the Paramount one, which also inspired Creighton Duke to look for secrets about Jason Voorhees. So they're different timelines. It's almost a Jason multiverse. You have Jason 1, or Jason from Earth 1, I guess you could say, in the Paramount world, and Jason from Earth 2 in the New Line world. That's how you can kind of look at it. And then for the remake, you have Jason of Earth 3 for that. That's the way you can kind of look at those timelines. There hasn't been a truly canon sequel to the Friday the 13th films since Part 8. You're from... Oh, you live in Istanbul. How is it there, Muzzy? What if JG wasn't so dummy thick? I wouldn't know how I'd get by. I mean... Gotta make money on OnlyFans, too. Pop an ass cheek for you. Alessandro says, the final girls early in the films, I'm too weak. The final girls at the end of the films, unlimited power. Sometimes, because Jenny was not weak at all. I felt like she wasn't weak at all. Alice was dumb, but she still was pretty strong. Like, she fought off Pamela multiple times, just never escaped. I don't think it's until we get to... Actually, now that I think of it, part 3, Chris Higgins is strong. Part 4, Trish Jarvis is strong. You don't really get a really weak final girl. If you can say anything, maybe Pam from part 5. But even then, she took on Roy with a chainsaw. So I don't necessarily know if final girls in the Friday the 13th films start out weak. Do I have a fan fiction page, Brady? My YouTube channel ultimately also serves as fan fiction. That's where a lot of my potential sequel videos come from, like the one I did for Scream, A Nightmare on Elm Street, multiple Friday the 13th ones. I'm still working on a Texas Chainsaw Massacre one that takes place directly after the first one. I was looking at changing the title of it because Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on what they called the murders of the first movie. I was going to change that title because I wanted it to be set 3 or 4 years after the first movie, and another massacre takes place in a different part. Almost, I even toyed around with the lettering, the TCM, calling it the Travis County Massacre, just to sort of broaden the body count and how dangerous Leatherface and the Sawyer family at that point is just Drayton, which I decided to keep the name Drayton, although they don't name any of the Sawyers in the first one. But it was like certain things I was adding to that. So it's sort of like a blank slate 4 years later. I was toying with the idea of reintroducing Chop Top in a more serious tone and going from there. But that is still in the works. I'm just working out certain things to try to keep it as faithful to the first one and not looking at any of the sequels to really kind of burden the story. Let me look up, see a couple things I missed. I have a new dark theory. Why is JG so damn thick? I mean, squats and pizza, ultimately. Garrett says, Lucy or Urza? I know Lucy. Well, I'm not sure what you're talking about in correspondence to those names, Garrett. Please clarify. My favorite dark theory from Chuck is Paul's connection to Jason. That one was a really interesting one that I was just watching Friday the 13th Part 2 and noticed that Paul's flannels looked very close to Jason's flannels. And then I thought, what if they were actually closer than what people thought? And with the way Paul acts in the movie is very suspicious. And then when Jenny's talking to him in the bar, the way they react to how she tries to humanize Jason also is very suspicious. What's going on, see ya? Who's all getting the 40th anniversary steelbook? Definitely. Most certainly. Gotta get it. Can Jason teleport in part 8? Yeah. I mean, we saw that in when he was killing Kelly Hu's character. We saw that like, he was just teleporting all around. And then the part where the teacher is running from Jason in the alley, runs into the building, and Jason's already on the top floor with him, throws him right back out. So definitely, Jason can most certainly teleport in part 8. Maybe do a series discussing the final girls of the franchise. That I might do a let's talk about Friday the 13th Part 2 with not Part 2 like as in just Part 2, but the final girls of Friday the 13th. That's a really good idea, Brady. I'd definitely be up for that. Garrett says, favorite wrestling tag team of all time. I mean, it's a bit off topic, but favorite wrestling tag team, the Four Horsemen. Like, I mean, it's a stable, but tag team wise, they had a tag team in there. So I'm definitely going with the Four Horsemen. Especially because I wasn't there for the 80s, so the ones primarily where it was like, I know it's touchy topic, but Chris Benoit and Arn Anderson, or Chris Benoit and Steve Mongo McMichael, I love that tag team. Oh, I'm doing good, CM. I'm doing good. Just talking some Friday the 13th with you guys. Brady says, yeah, Texas Chainsaw sequel showing what happened to the truck driver at the end. My story actually does explain that. The truck driver is ultimately why the Sawyers have to leave the house, ultimately, and why it's set 4 years later. They've gone underground hiding, trying to stay off the radar, and the truck driver is one of the witnesses that lead the cops back to the farmhouse. I don't have the main characters. What the fuck is her name? Her name's escaping me at the moment. Like, I had it for a second, but the one that's in the truck laughing hysterically, Sally Hardesty. I don't have her showing anybody anything or being really much help to the police, just because she's crazy at that point. She's mentally broken, scarred. The cops can't really get anything from her because of how bonkers she is. You can't trust anything she says because she's babbling. She starts contradicting herself in certain aspects. So pretty much they kind of just are ready to commit her until this truck driver is also found. But he's of clear mind and he's corroborating parts of her story. And they go back to find where his truck is in the houses. They find the body of Nubbins. And they can also go to the house where they find all the bone furniture, all the bodies of Sally's friends, Franklin, like all of those people. But they never find Leatherface or Drayton. And then it's set 4 years later, somewhere else in Travis County, where the murders start picking up again because someone recognizes Drayton. That's ultimately what I had originally in my head as a concept of where I was going with my Texas Chainsaw story. But it's been evolving here and there ever since. Paris says, which I'm sorry if I'm running late on a lot of your comments. I'm trying to follow everything in order. Paris says, Jason Goes to Hell is the only that's in Earth 2 in my eyes. It's 1 through 8, the very ending of Jason Goes to Hell, then it's versus, then lastly X. That's the end. Then Earth 2, Jason Goes to Hell universe. Then there's Earth 3, 2009. I mean, that's a way to look at it. But I still have way too many concerns over anything that New Line has touched with the series. They got some really cool kills, but ultimately they more style over substance with a lot of their takes on Jason. Well, they're from the anime Fairy Tail. I only see one episode of that. So in order for me to mention anything with that, Garrett, I'd have to get back to you until I can catch up. What's going on, Kurt Drayton? How you doing? Says, I think it's more likely Jason stole Paul's clothes. He's used to do that. Oh, he used to do that. Maybe. That's always a possibility. But I mean, wouldn't someone make mention, especially Paul, like, who the fuck is stealing my shirts? Like, someone would say something there. Like, hey, you stealing my shirts again, Jenny? There'd be something there. Like, unless everyone around there is all wearing flannel, I kind of do feel that Paul was working with Jason to an extent. Because, I mean, Jason, everyone tries to say Jason is dumb. He's mentally handicapped. One, I've gotten to debates of this on other forums. There has never been anything in the Paramount films to suggest that Jason has any kind of mental handicap outside of just being lonely and wanting his mother back. And that's not even mental handicap. That's just separation anxiety. That's pretty much him being disturbed over the loss and living alone supposedly for so long. But Jason knowing that he was deformed, covering his head with a sack, that's already very suspicious walking through a neighborhood when he's going to kill Alice. Jason without the sack, with an eye down here, is also very suspicious, and someone would notice, especially with someone being killed or even missing. Like that, especially in the 80s, at that point in time, he'd have been prime suspect number one. Now, they wouldn't have known who he was, but there would have been some kind of indication that, you know, we saw this guy, he looked like this. There would have been some kind of canvassing for him. I mean, Jason's stealthy, but when you're walking unmasked through a neighborhood, especially a neighborhood that was kind of like that with kids going back and forth, the kid would have saw Jason and instantly reacted, whether he had the bag on or not. So I feel like Paul kind of had something to do. I think it was Paul that we see walking in the street and calling Alice. And once Alice answered, then he sent Jason after her. That would have probably been an add-on to that theory. CM says, yeah, I'm going to stream some Friday later. Just a heads up, but I am enjoying me some JG right now. I'm glad you're enjoying it, my friend. Glad. Ethan says, what happened to Paul in part 2? I did a theory, I believe that's also in the video, where I thought Paul, once Jason attacked Paul became fearful of after Jenny injured Jason and ultimately fled. Because he's not there when Jenny wakes up. Because if we look at the theory that Paul had something to do with everything that happened in Camp Crystal Lake, or Packanack, like he had some kind of hand in that, not only would Paul be worried about Jason coming to get him, but the legal ramifications of being accomplices to those murders. That would have been another thing of why he would have left. But Paul is not counted among the body count. We don't know where Paul is. We still, to this day, don't know where Paul is. Or Paul's friend, for that matter. He never came back to Packanack. Brady says there's a lot of girl power in horror movies. Which is funny because if you go by Siskel and Ebert and all them, they all say that horror movies hate women. Which is weird. Because how do you have final girls but you hate women? Like, it doesn't make any sense. When's my next theory video, CM? I'm working on it. I'm working on a couple of them. Got a couple of them in my head that I want to do. And now that I know people are kind of looking forward to the what ifs, I'm going to start working on those too. Surgical Duke, how you doing? Is Jason Goes to Hell after Freddy's dead? And also, is Freddy versus Jason after Jason Goes to Hell and Freddy's dead? That's a very interesting question, because Jason Goes to Hell, if according to Adam Marcus even, Jason Goes to Hell ignores part 8. But at the same time, it has to ignore part 7, because where does Jason get the hockey mask? Why does the hockey mask look the way it does on Jason? So, in order to make sense of Jason Goes to Hell, you have to divorce it from the Paramount films, which is what New Line essentially did. New Line's films are its own canon, aside from Paramount. So, with the way they did it, they kind of fucked themselves on their own continuity. Because where Freddy's Dead itself already doesn't make a whole lot of sense to the Nightmare series. And I'm working on theories with that as well. The first one being one of the last theories I did with talking about how old Freddy was when he died. That's going to be leading a lot into that. But pretty much, if I was to sort of chronicle the ways that Freddy's Dead fits with Jason Goes to Hell. That fits with that. That's okay. Freddy dies, then Jason dies. Freddy's glove comes up, grabs the mask. There's no real issues of continuity between those two. The issues come when we go to Freddy versus Jason. When Jason gets awoken by Freddy. If we are to believe that that takes place a year, even if we went 5 years after Jason Goes to Hell, which it doesn't take place after that, it kind of doesn't make sense, because where's the Voorhees house? Why is the dagger not in Jason's heart? Did the demons only take him under like an inch of dirt? And why is the mask still there when Freddy came up and grabbed it? Like, those continuity things really don't make sense, which to me means that this is a standalone. This was not meant to connect to anything else Friday the 13th aside from Freddy vs. Jason. Jason X, even though it came out before Freddy vs. Jason, was meant to again be its own standalone thing, because I mean it only makes reference to Pamela and Jason killing nearly 300 people. That's the only references to the other films that we have. But the mask is different, which you can argue that he got a new mask. The way Jason's powers operate on here, being regenerative, which kind of making him a Wolverine, Deadpool-esque kind of character, regenerating loss and damaged tissue, that kind of is a change to an extent. But overall, I always look at all the New Line films as ultimately, because Jason Goes to Hell is its standalone, because it doesn't really connect well to Freddy vs. Jason, and Freddy vs. Jason doesn't really connect well to Jason X. So they're all kind of standalones to me. What's going on, Harley? Am I playing Dead by Daylight on the stream or any games? Not tonight. Not tonight. It's all about Friday the 13th and Tolkien Friday the 13th. Stick around, though, if you want. Alright. I am falling so far behind. Alright, what's going on, Matt Hart? How you doing? Paris says, I think Paul was killed. Jason bursts through the window. Jason and Paul gets into one last scuffle by the rise of morning. Jason kills him and the ambulance picks Jenny up before he can return. Which I would say maybe. But the only thing is, we're forgetting with that Paris. When Jason pulls Jenny through the window, he has the machete still in his collarbone. Like, it's still there. You can see it. Like, the handle's popping out and everything. But then, at the beginning of part 3, Jason pulls the machete out and he's nudging himself off, like away. So unless Jason and Paul got into a fight that took them all the way back to the shack, and Paul knocked out Jason, or Jason killed Paul that knocked him out as well, and then did all that, it doesn't make much sense. And even then, they still count the bodies total, all the new kills that are in the shack. The deputy, the one girl Terry, all of them are counted, but Paul is not. He's like, there's one person, I think it's like 1 or 2 people missing from that overall body count, and we never see Paul's body in the shack ever, at all. Surgical Duke says, what do you think Steven and Jessica do after Jason Goes to Hell? Well, my thing is, Steven, if we're looking at it from a logical standpoint, Steven and Jessica probably went to jail being blamed for most of those murders. Like, because I mean, Steven was already suspected, and he broke out of prison. He broke out of prison in a prison with a ton of dead cops. And anybody that ultimately could corroborate his story, that was a credible witness, is likely dead. Jessica, which would be seen as an accomplice with him, would go down with him. And they wouldn't take her word because she's with him. So she wouldn't be credible. So ultimately, I think both of them be in jail. The baby likely up for adoption or put in foster care, something like that. I know I did What Ifs before, Kat, but I wasn't sure if people really were into them. What's going on, Ty? How you doing? Late? I mean, shit, we're only... Oh, damn, I didn't realize we're over 40 minutes in. But yeah, welcome, Ty of Junebug Films. What's going on, Gabe? Like, man, dude, all I know is Freddy murdered everyone on the continent. Pretty much. Like, that's kind of something that bothered me. Like, you would have figured if Freddy killed... Let's take into account. Freddy got almost dream godlike power from killing just the Elm Street kids. Now, let's extrapolate that to every kid in Springwood. How much power would Freddy have? He should have enough power to break the walls of reality. Like, he shouldn't have needed his daughter in order to do that. Like, that didn't make any sense. Like, Freddy should have been untouchable with all of those souls. Where do I get my tardy slip? In the office, you will need to step out the doorway, turn left, walk at least 20 feet down the hall, turn right, then turn another right, then turn another right, then turn left, and go back to where you came. The note will be there waiting for you. Paris says, to be fair, the regeneration does fit in. How the hell are you going to tell me he looks the way he did in Part 7, then looks more fleshy in Part 8 without any regeneration? Mostly because if we look at it, we don't know what Jason looks like without the mask until he gets doused with the toxic waste. And we know the toxic waste melts him. Now, granted, I give you the whole thing that it looks like we don't see any of his rib cage, we don't see any of the bones in the back, but that's also because his clothes have magically reformed. But as far as the face goes, why the face design has changed, we know the toxic waste melts Jason's skin. So when he gets doused in the face with the toxic waste and he pulls the mask off, it's very possible that that toxic waste was meant to have melted his face to the way that we see it. Prior to the toxic waste hitting his face, it could have looked very similar to what we see in Part 7. At least that's just a kind of workaround theory. But like I said, we never see Jason's face until that toxic waste hits. Matt Hart says, I am good. Can I share this live video in my Friday the 13th group? Yes, by all means, Matt. Definitely. What's going on, Super Cat? If you could add any new content to Friday the 13th, the game, what would you add? Uber isn't allowed to be said. Ghost Jason. Without a doubt. Ghost Jason. Like, Ghost Jason would be my first choice with that. Just because I think Daylight map with Camp Crystal Lake as it's shown in the Never Hike Alone fan film, along with Ghost Jason as one of the Jason skins, definitely. That's the way I would go. Can I go to the bathroom? You wait your turn, Machete. Ty says, I think I have a good excuse for being late. Where I live, we got an EFO or EF, one tornado. So I spent 5 hours doing 6 jobs yesterday. So I spent today sleeping and just relaxing. Now I'll let it slide this time. But, you know, tornadoes are not any kind of excuse here. You need to be here when you get... No, I'm just playing. You're good, Ty. Seems like Jason picked up a new shirt underwater. I mean, That's probably where he hid his stash that he stole from Paul. It's very possible. What's going on, Black Stylo? How you doing? Brady says, have you seen the Merkins music video parodies? I have seen some of them, have not seen all of them, especially some of their newer ones. I got hooked on the Game of Thrones one that they did. Off the White Stripes kind of parody kind of thing they did with the Night King. I got hooked on that. Devin says, I think Jason has a healing factor. See, the only thing that bothers me with the whole healing factor thing is that to believe and make everything canon, all these series, we have to believe that the healing factor gave him his eye back, but then the other eye was taken out. And then we have to believe in Freddy versus Jason that the healing factor gave him both of his eyes back. And then in Jason X, he has both of his eyes until the one girl pulls the one out while doing, I guess, the autopsy on him while he's frozen. But even then, it kind of looks like he still has both eyes up until he becomes Uber Jason. But then, and that's all in rapid succession, mind you. We're talking Jason from part 4 to 6 still was missing the same eye. Part 7, still missing the same eye. Part 8, still missing the same eye. But then the regeneration kicks in and gives him his eye back. Like, I felt like the eye, especially for him being a predator, would have ultimately been the first thing that his regenerative powers would have probably worked on. Especially because the eye that he did have was his blind eye initially. Oh, no. Pretty much with that, the thumb that we see, because we also have to take into account, Paris, that Jason is wearing gloves in part 8, which he did not have in part 7. The gloves were essentially, whatever bits of gloves there were, they were fused to his hands. So, like, pretty much, you're definitely good with that. However, now it becomes a sense of decay where Jason, we know in the water in part 7, pretty much decayed to the point of the bones being out there. But when we see him rise up in part 8, we do see the thumb. The thumb doesn't show any bone. That is true. So, I mean, maybe oversaturation and Jason not truly being dead going from part 7 to part 8, maybe that had some kind of ramifications on the flesh sort of shifting over the bone. But ultimately, that would be a good argument for regeneration, if anything. The face thing, that I still attribute to the toxic waste. But the thumb part, I'd have to look at his thumbs in part 7 again. I'm fairly certain there's bone showing. But also at the same time, I feel like between part 7 and 8, we're kind of missing a movie to really illustrate how Jason got clothed again. But that also goes into why I did the one thing theory way back. Did part 8 really happen? Or was that part of sort of Rennie's creativity as a writer? Like, did she pretty much take maybe what happened on the boat as like a killer may have like killed someone or someone got murdered on the boat and let her imagination run with it and fabricated the entire story of Jason, like being on the boat and in New York and everything? Like, maybe, but that is definitely a good argument with the thumb. Machete says, so Jason's mask in part 7 broke. And in part 8, he gets a new mask, but it still has the axe mark. How do you explain that? Well, the way I would explain it is, as we see at the end of part 7, we know that Jason's split in half mask was recovered by the paramedics, EMTs, fire department, whoever picked it up at the end. Now, chances are, newspapers would have probably ran with that. They would have probably showed the mask, and they would have probably put it side by side with the picture of Jason that they had. I think it was what, in part 4 or part 5 that they had a picture of Jason wearing the mask. So it would stand to reason that the guy at the beginning of part 8, I forget his name, he had the mask, and he probably used a Dremel or even something to cut it to alter it to make it look like Jason. Like, I mean, he did bring his girlfriend to Camp Crystal Lake, and he did know the story about Pamela and the Jason murders. So it's safe to say he might have been a Jason fanboy, like someone that idolizes serial killers. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he may have put the axe mark in the mask based on what it looked like in the pictures that they recovered from the broken mask in part 7. And probably in correspondence with the picture of what it looked like before it was damaged in part 4, and well, part 3 rather. Ty says, I would have loved to have seen Duke in the Friday the 13th games. I mean, he would have been a great addition. I mean, canon aside, Duke in pretty much anything that they could have put in there would have been a great addition. Especially to have it where he was an alternate hero to come kill Jason. Like, you could go into the radio and it could be either Duke or Tommy that ends up coming. That would have been fine. Yeah, the black mesh in the eye holes bothered me, Gabe. I felt like if you cannot achieve the blacking out of the mask without just like natural shadowing in a film, then it probably shouldn't be done, just because when light does shine on it, like it does in Friday the 13th Part 8, you can tell. Like, now don't get me wrong, like pretty much cosplayers that are mimicking that same thing, because I know Paris did the mask with the black mesh on it, and I mean, it turns out great. But to me, because I thought about often, because I've had people say, when I'm wearing my Michael Myers mask, wear like a black mesh underneath to try to keep the eyes always blacked out. I'm not a big fan of doing that unless I can naturally black them out myself with lighting. Because to me, if something shines on it the wrong way, it ruins the whole illusion. Just in my opinion. Yeah, the Slash Street boys, I did see, Brady. Surgical Duke says, I wish they could do a Jason Goes to Hell 2 where the characters come back to life and Jason Voorhees is the main villain in the sequel. What's your thoughts about it? If they were going to do another Jason Goes to Hell, I would probably remake one that fits more in line with the Paramount series. I wouldn't want to do it where it is off the heels of the original. I think something like that should be remade to fit within the Friday the 13th lore, not the New Line lore. And ultimately, you can have it where many different characters return that survived before. Maybe not as a reunion, but maybe through like cameos of like interviews and stuff like that. Those that survived Camp Blood, Packanack, and so forth. All those kind of things. And ultimately, it leads to a maybe a confrontation with Jason at the end that does actually kill him. Like, not supernaturally demons dragging him to hell, but killing him for good. Like, Jason is actually going to hell. Like, maybe, I mean, that hell might be a bit too strong. But, I mean, we have Jason Lives. I would probably be like Friday the 13th, Jason's dead. Something like that. Hey, what's going on, Play? Welcome back, CM. Trying to, like, jump forward to get caught up. The Friday movies can't be chronically placed unless you really have a crazy imagination. Actually, up until part 8, they actually can. Because we know part 1 takes place in 1979, according to Pamela's tombstone that we see. We know that parts 2, 3, and 4 all take place in 1984, according to Paul at the campfire that says, 5 years. 5 years later. Part 5 is a little tricky because we can assume that Tommy is still in his teens, maybe 17 or 18, after part 4, and I would probably place that around another 5 years after part 4, so make it around 1988, 1989 territory. It's supposed to be 2 years after part 5 is when part 6 happens, although Tom McLaughlin has said that his movie part 6 is supposed to take place the year that it came out. Doesn't exactly work, but we're going to go with the actual chronological order. So that would kind of be 1991, 1992. Part 7 is supposed to be 10 years after part 6. So we're talking 2001, 2002. Or I said part 7, right? 10 years after part 6. Then we get to part 8. Part 8 is where things get a little wonky just based on the story that we hear at the beginning of part 8, where the guy with his girlfriend indicates that the Pamela murders took place 30 years prior to where they are. So if we go at the time that it's a year after part 7, so it's 2003. So we go backtrack 93, 83, 73. That doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. But if you go at the time that it's supposedly, as the director said, part 8 was supposed to be at the time that it came out, which was 1989. If we go by that, then the 30-year time frame works. Because you got 89 to 79, 79 to 69, and 69 to 59. Jason drowned in 57. So that kind of works. But it chronologically, according to their information, does not work at all. Adding mesh on the mask. Never fucking doing it again. A remake for the first film would be cool, but the thing is, Ethan, with the remake of the first film, it relies heavily on, at least for your initial watch, is not knowing who the killer is. I did do a video on a proper remake of how to add that mystery back in, but still working within the realms of characters with Friday the 13th, the first film, and some of the other characters in the series. To where you think it's Pamela killing people. Yeah, I know this story. Pamela's killing everyone. Turns out to be Pamela only killed the first 2 people that she saw as responsible for Jason's death, but it was another killer that was there afterwards that killed everyone else. And Pamela actually has a role almost as a semi-hero in that film. Not a whole hero. I mean, she's not saving the day, but she does feel guilty for what she did, and she does come back to the camp in order to save Alice. The killer, however, is someone completely different. What's up, Matthew? How you doing? Anthony says Jason versus Ghostface. Jason. I mean, unless they can get the drop on Jason. Jason doesn't answer too many phone calls, so I would highly doubt that they would have the jump on him. I mean, as much stress as you got from it, Paris, it looks good, though. It looks like movie accurate. I'm doing good, play. I'm doing good. Gabe says, I like Part 7 because of its mood and atmosphere, and especially the look of Jason. But I think it's probably got the weakest story and characters out of all the Friday movies. Only tying with Part 8. I agree. Part 7 had the effects going for it. As far as the look of Jason, the telekinetic superpowers of Tina, some interesting concepts of what they did with those things. But ultimately, if you break it down in a story, it neither adds nor takes away anything to the Friday the 13th lore. Like, literally nothing. The only thing we get from Friday the 13th Part 7 is that there is telekinetic people that are among that world to add to the supernatural aspects of Jason. That's the only thing we can kind of take away from it. As far as the story, it doesn't move the needle one way or the other. What saves Part 8 is a more unique concept with terrible execution. I can completely agree with that. Ultimately, with Part 8, one, taking him out of Camp Crystal Lake was dumb to me to begin with. I mean, it's a cool idea for like a fan film to put Jason in New York, but as far as keeping the lore tight, taking Jason out of Crystal Lake, and their excuses for it is, well, it's just another guy killing people in the campgrounds. Yeah, that's what the Friday the 13th core audience likes. Like, you're taking Jason to New York. Saying that that's dumb and boring is like literally saying that, you know what? Freddy's no longer in dreams. He's now in your food. Because, you know, dreams are just boring, but hunger is where it's at. Like, no, it's fucking stupid. Like, if you want to do something in New York, create a new killer and put them in New York. Bring back Maniac Cop. Take him to New York. That would kind of make more sense. Jason in New York did not make sense. Some of the telekinesis I felt was used great. Having her throw a TV looked awkward, but the scenes like where she moved the matchbox, it was like, okay, that seems pretty cool. The only complaint that I had really about her telekinesis was that she went from noob to expert pro fucking gold in literally the span of 2 hours after like 10 years of not knowing how to use her powers. That's what bothered me with that. What's going on, Sebastian? Matthew says, I love Kane Hodder as Jason, but I feel Ted White from the final chapter is highly underrated. So is Richard Brooker, to be completely honest. I mean, Kane Hodder is always on the forefront of Jason actors, but Ted White and Richard Brooker always seem to be forgotten. Like, oh yeah, he's that guy from Part 3, or he's that guy from Part 4. And to me, they were a bit more effective in how they played Jason. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Kane's portrayal. I do love Kane's portrayal. I love how he played Jason angry. But, I mean, you can't forget the other guys, too. That's kind of, you know, you can't do that. They played them equally as well. What's going on, Cameron Rudge? How are you doing? All the way from Mixer. Oh, shit. How you go? How goes over there? Tyrone says, what about Elias Voorhees? I mean, you could add Elias in as a killer. But I think if we're going to add Elias in, I think we kind of need to just keep it Elias. That was the kind of thing that bothered me with Vengeance. Vengeance had a really good setup with returning siblings or fucking family members of past victims of Jason. And Elias was a good bad guy. See it? CJ Graham playing Elias was good. That was good casting. They should have just kept it as Elias. You did not have to bring Jason into that at all. Elias was more than enough to be a killer. Once they added Jason in, it was just weird. Oh, you're Karate Raptor, Cameron. Oh, shit. Well, welcome. Mankind says, I like Jason X too much. Nothing wrong with liking Jason X. Like I said, all the Jason movies I like. I think are fun. They're always entertaining. But when we start talking about a canonical story, once we get past the Paramount film, really past part 7, canon-wise, it goes to shit. Or what about explaining the mystery father that raped Pamela? That would be cool too, Tyrone. That'd be cool too, especially if they did use my theory of tying in Roy Burns as the guy that raped Pamela. That'd be a pretty cool thing to see. I mean, they likely wouldn't. I would, just because it now adds more credence to part 5. But ultimately, they'll likely go with a new kind of supernatural-esque, demonic kind of character in order to explain Jason further. Which is always weird because I never saw Jason as evil. I never saw anything he was doing in at least the first 4 films as really evil. Ultimately, just him wanting his mother back. And he's constantly being hurt by these other people, so he's attacking back. Or in part 2, where the people invaded his area, starting with the deputy and Packanack. So he saw it as an invasion of people trying to take his mother from him. So he went on the offensive. At least that's the kind of the way I looked at it. I never looked at Jason as being an evil character. Oh, awesome, Matthew. Awesome. I know, you know, I love. Ty says, what would you do with a Friday the 13th roller coaster? Ultimately, I would kind of want to do where it starts as like one of those like rides where you go through a tunnel and you see kind of different camps and everything. Sort of like the murder ride from House of a Thousand Corpses. And then you go up and then you start going through the loops and everything. But I would kind of want to add something to do with the Friday the 13th films in order to really pay homage to everything. Ooh, excuse me. Anthony says, what if Jason goes after Tommy's sister again? I mean, I don't see him necessarily going to hunt her down like he did Alice. With Alice, he had a vendetta against. With Tommy's sister, again, he feels like he's defending himself. So he's trying to take the offensive and kill these people before they kill him. But I mean, if you wanted to base a movie around Tommy's sister being stalked and hunted, you could make an argument for something like that. Want to play DBD? I'm not playing DBD tonight, Cameron. Right now, we're just talking Friday the 13th. Tyrone says, I could go for a shared slasher universe movie like the old Universal Monsters. I could go for that too, but I wouldn't want to force them all together, like, you know, like Tommy going after Michael Myers, but hey, here's Jason, and kick him out, and going after Michael Myers, going after Michael Myers, going after Michael Myers. Hey, but here's Freddy. Like, I wouldn't want that. I would want the way they would have to do it in order for me to like it is write out maybe a 4 to 5 movie plan and carefully tailor the story to coincide with that. Like, so like when you're writing a comic book or something, you have maybe a 10-issue arc of something. That's the way you kind of need to do the movies. Like, yeah, you might cut off certain things here and there and stop the film too early before it goes into something else. That's fine. But you got to look at the movies like, this movie is issue 1. This movie is issue 2. Almost look at it like a 10-episode kind of thing with a Netflix series. If you're going to do a shared universe like that, that's probably the best way to do it and not shove everything in your face all at once. You think they ever find a lost footage of old Abe in Friday the 13th Part 3? I'm not sure, Robert. I'm not sure. I could not answer that. I mean, I would like to see him hold more significance than just holding that eye up to the camera. But, I mean, I guess we'll never... I can't say we'll never know, because eventually some fan of the series is going to make a movie that's going to answer that. Like what happened to Abel. Like Jason was evil in the Part 3 alternate novelization. He maniacally laughed. That would have kind of been very fucking offsetting. To hear Jason laugh, like maniacally, what would that sound like? Oh yeah, Friday the 13th Dark Ride. Just like I said, Tyrone, that would be really fucking cool. See, Gabe, that goes back to my one theory, where I was talking about how Paul worked with Jason. Like I said, to reiterate, I think Paul found out where Alice lived. And Paul, I believe, had a prior relationship to Jason. Probably was at the camp when Jason was a kid. Like him and Jason were both kids at Camp Crystal Lake. Maybe Paul was a little bit younger. I think that's I'm willing to bet that that's a possibility. He probably knew Jason, probably discovered Jason was still alive, and helped Jason find Alice. Now, the motive for Paul doing that, I think, could also be interesting. But just to go back to that before I get into the motive, I think Paul was the one that called Alice. Called her on the phone, Alice answered, he hung up, and then he sent Jason after her. Told him where to go, probably helped Jason put Pamela's head in the refrigerator. And I think it probably wasn't Jason that took the kettle off of the pot. I think it might have been Paul that did that. But the motive for Paul doing so, despite all the warnings from law enforcement and everything, where Paul seemed very dismissive, I think Paul was looking to cash in on all the fame that Alice probably have gotten from the whole Camp Blood thing with Pamela. Like, he probably saw, like, she was probably in all kinds of magazines, TV shows, and stuff like that in the 2 months that she had after surviving the Pamela incident, and probably thought, I could probably do that for myself. And took out Alice as sort of a prelude to that whole thing. For Paul, it was greed. His motive was greed. Because why else would you open up packing that across from a murder camp when everyone's telling you don't do it? Law enforcement's telling you don't do it. It has such a reputation that you're likely not going to get kids there to begin with. But he does it anyways. And the way he kind of orchestrates everyone to go out that night, except for a certain amount of people, for Jason to turn into cannon fodder. But Paul and his friend, along with Jenny, are among those that don't stay behind. That's very odd. And then when Jenny is talking about Jason and humanizing Jason, the look him and his friend give each other, like his friend, I believe, was even in on it. But the way they look at it is very suspicious. And Jason, who we know to killed so many people, randomly misses Paul in the dark after sneaking up on him. Like, Jason, how many times have you known Jason to really miss an open shot like that with a spear on a person that's blinded by darkness, and Jason is going after him. And then Jason knocks Paul out and leaves him there. No weapons or anything. It's not like he did with Ali, where he beat Ali in the head and assumed that he was dead from it. He had no weapons to really speak of to really kill Paul. But he leaves him there. Enough for Paul to find the shack. Then you have to figure, how did Paul find the shack if he hasn't been there before? Was he hearing the screams of Jenny? Jenny wasn't screaming like that. Not in the shack. She was trying to trick Jason. The only scream that she really gave was when Jason cut her leg with the pickaxe. So how did Paul find her? That would be another thing. I feel like Paul been there before. So it kind of makes sense when you couple all of that together. What if Jason and Paul was really in cahoots with each other the whole time? Like maybe Paul was Jason's caretaker for the 5 years between part 1 and part 2. Like, and that also explains like the stylistic look with the flannels and everything. At least that's the way I look at it. Did Crazy Ralph and Abel know each other, or are they just avatars warning of omens? I think Crazy Ralph knew Pamela. If I was to stake any money on a connection, I think Crazy Ralph knew Pamela. And Pamela used Crazy Ralph to keep people away from Camp Crystal Lake. Once Pamela died, Jason saw Crazy Ralph. And during all the commotion of people moving into Packanack, probably spotted Crazy Ralph around his area and killed Crazy Ralph because he thought Crazy Ralph was trespassing. Abel, I think if Abel was any connection to Jason at all, he was likely the original guy that pulled Jason out of the lake and resuscitated him, and was probably the original owner of Jason's shack. That's if I was going to put any money on any kind of further connection outside of Doomsay. How would Paul know about Alice? You mean as far as the story? Like overall? Because, I mean, she would probably be all over, especially in a small town like Wessex County. Why did Trish leave Tommy behind? That's kind of explained in the Tommy tapes if you consider any of the information that you're giving canon. Ultimately, she had to move on with her life to pretty much live life. Tommy was too obsessed with Jason. Like, she couldn't be locked to that anymore. Especially since it's a constant reminder of their mother's death. So that kind of makes sense. Should Paul be the killer in a new movie? I don't think a killer, because if that was the case, I think Paul's more of a swindler. I think Paul should probably resurface and try to reopen the camp again to supposedly finish what he started and have the notoriety that he wanted, since he was never connected to the Packanack murders at all. Nobody ever connected him to Jason, ever. So pretty much him returning and reopening a camp in Camp Crystal Lake. Let's say even if you did part 8 and you wanted a new way to bring in Jason or anything like that. Jason's long dead. They thought they have his body in New York, and Paul comes to reopen Packanack, or saying fuck it, just reopening Camp Crystal Lake itself. What if now Jason has evolved to spirit form and he's actually haunting the camp, like ghost-wise? Not just physical body, but an actual ghost Jason. And because Paul doing that stirs his spirit up and ultimately results in the murders of many people. That, or you could have the ghost of Jason start to possess people here and there, killing people here and there. It'd be being a bit the different kind of thing, sort of like how Jason Goes to Hell did, but it's actually Jason. Like, it's his ghost that's doing it. But, I mean, I can see the argument that you probably wouldn't ever really see Jason in corporeal form. Just astral projections here and there. So, I mean, it would be walking very lightly on Jason Goes to Hell ground, but also would kind of fit in with the story, with the way of you're bringing in Paul, reopening Camp Crystal Lake, and keeping it just Camp Crystal Lake. No daggers, no family members that can resurrect Jason or anything like that. It's just an evolution of Jason's spirit. Jason's change of look is confusing between part 2 and 3. I mean, yeah, as far as from a production standpoint, that is true. I did a theory that said pretty much the look that we see in Jason in part 2 isn't what he actually looks like. Mostly due to what Jenny sees. There's a kind of a weird thing when she pulls the sack off of his head and they jump back and they're looking at the side of his head, because we know Jason's on his side, according to part 3. Like when he's like inching himself off. We know he's on the side, and the side that we see is the deformed side from what Jenny sees. So I've always pictured it as it's a possibility that Jenny only saw the deformed side. She didn't see the other side. So when that dream sequence happens and Jason grabs her through the window, she knows what Jason looks like on that side and mentally projects that. But the other side looks fairly normal. So she doesn't know what that side looks like and mentally projects that as well as she can kind of think of. Because Jason already looked grotesque on one side. And she probably had an inkling that the other side didn't look the same. Because, I mean, the whole thing was she worked with kids. And the condition that Jason has does hit kids pretty hard. So she probably knew that that was a condition that Jason had. So just mentally trying to put the missing pieces together probably is what gave us that look at the end of part 2. And the look that we see in part 3 is his actual look, which is close to what we see in part 4, although it's different. But I mean, at that point, maybe you could say Jason got a nerve or two hit when he got the axe in the head and it kind of made his mouth protrude a little bit. I mean, there's any multiple things that you could probably put out there as a reasonable explanation. What if Paul is related to Jason as the plot twist? A cousin or like something like that would be pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. But I also feel like that would kind of be too easy to connect dots with that. And it does, like I say, it shrinks the world a little bit. That everyone that's a bad guy at Camp Crystal Lake is now related to the Voorhees family. I don't want that. Now, I know I did say I want Roy to be Jason's father, but Roy isn't a Voorhees. He's someone else. Like, he's Burns, Roy Burns. It does make a legacy for Jason, but it also spans out that he had another kid, Joey, and then became a killer himself. So, I mean, it kind of expands it a bit in Roy's situation, but it shrinks it if you make Paul a member of the Voorhees family. Should Jason have his part 2 facial hair? I think Jason should have more patches of hair in general. Because, I mean, him being in the woods, and this is the thing, like, where we know Jason does pay attention to his looks. We're talking about a guy, because I don't care what they say, there's no way Jason just came back to life at the end of part 1, and in 2 months grew to full man size and killed Alice in part 2, and then 5 years later stayed that way. But then in part 3, 4, and just he kept constantly growing. Jason was meant to have been the same size between 2, 3, and 4. It was just the different actors. You weren't really supposed to pay that much attention to it. But I am fully on board with the idea that Jason survived his drowning in 1957 and lived in the woods ever since then. So because of that, it does stand the reason that Jason should probably have facial hair, patches of hair on his head, some bushy ass fucking eyebrows. Like he should be a little bit more hairier than what he is. Which I mean, I could have stuck with. I'm completely fine. Like when they showed him having hair in Jason X, I was for that. Like I kind of that would make sense to me. Like him being bald is kind of too stereotypic for me because Freddy's bald and stuff. It was like, okay, now you got to have a bald-headed serial killer with a mask. Didn't really make sense for a guy living in the woods with, and we didn't see. I don't think we saw any mirrors in the shack at all. So I don't know how he's shaving, unless someone was taking care of him and shaving him for himself. But then we go from part 2 where we know he had hair. We know he has hair in part 3 and 4 because he has little strands of hair in the back, which I've been meaning. I was wondering if I should add that to my hood, but that's beyond the point. We know he has little strands of hair in the back, so did he just decide to take it upon himself to shave his head at the little corner store market where he kills the 2 people and gets the new clothes in part 3? What's going on, Hawkpool? Welcome back, Machete. Tyrone, wonder what happened to Reggie the Reckless in part 5. I thought, personally, that he was supposed to be Duke. But then after talking to Ty, I feel like if we were ever to bring Duke back, I feel like Duke should be related to Ali from part 3. And that's how he got obsessed with Jason. Like, maybe he was Ali's brother, like little brother, and he looked up to Ali and kind of idolized him being in his little motorcycle gang and all that. And when he found out that Jason killed him, he became obsessive. Maybe over all serial killers and fucking mass killers, criminals, and all that, and it made him want to become a bounty hunter. But then when the word got out that Jason kept constantly coming back, maybe that kind of made him want to dabble into the occult. Like maybe there's something extra to Jason. Maybe he reached out to Tommy to figure out what happened. That would be my way of bringing him into the Paramount world. As far as Reggie goes, I think Reggie likely moved on, probably as scarred as Tommy. I would have loved to have seen a sequel where Reggie went through the same shit that Tommy did with the hallucinations of Roy. Maybe he could be Roy's Tommy. Maybe that's a possibility. Like he's seeing hallucinations of Roy instead of Tommy seeing hallucinations of Jason. That could be something to look into as far as the Friday the 13th spinoff. See, that's a possibility too, Matthew. I can't remember what Friday the 13th film was going to use that as a basis. What if Jason's look evolves because his look is the projection of our worst fears? There was supposedly a fan film that was going to dive into that. I can't remember the name of it, but I do remember that was a thing. Which ultimately I thought also involved Tommy's. Was it Vengeance before Vengeance kind of got retooled? I kind of think that was Vengeance. Yeah, I want Paul to be a money-grubbing asshole, not a Voorhees. It would probably be like the Leatherface family. I think Jason deserves a mustache. That'd be kind of off-putting. Like you see the little holes around and there's like little bits of hair poking out. Man. Anthony says Jason goes to Texas. No, I don't want Jason leaving Camp Crystal Lake. Because then it's what's the point of having the backstory? He drowned at Crystal Lake. His mother died at Crystal Lake. He should always stay at Crystal Lake. There should never be a reason that he ever leaves Camp Crystal Lake. Ever. Unless he's forcibly taken, which then his whole motivation should be going home. That should be the only thing. Thank you, Tyrone. Thank you, Matthew, as well. Like, I mean, I'm glad you guys agree with it. I personally think it fits better than what the original storyline was supposed to be with Duke and how it relates to Jason. Because then it's like you're trying to figure out, well, when did Jason kill his girlfriend? And when did Jason figure out that, like, when did he figure out that Jason was supernatural? Like, when did all this happen? It makes more sense to just put in there that he's related to Ali, Ali's little brother, and so forth. What if Jenny was Tommy Jarvis's psychiatrist and counselor? That would be pretty awesome, too. That would be... I think Jenny should have probably worked with both Tommy and Reggie. Like, going forward. And their connection is a hockey mask killer. Jenny needs to come back. I don't know if you can get the same actress. I've heard she's retired, but she definitely needs to come back. Like the character or the actress if you can. Maybe not in a way to have her running from Jason or anything like that. Those days are gone. Just having her as a child psychiatrist would be really awesome. Jason Goes to Texas was Topps Comics, Jason versus Leatherface. And that was a cool story for what it was, but I don't like the idea of taking Jason out of Camp Crystal Lake. To me, it kind of demeans the purpose. Oh yeah, they bring Paul back this time. He should definitely be killed off. Jason was in Texas in the 2009 reboot movie, I think. I mean, it had the look because it was done by Marcus Nispel, and they reused a lot of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre actors, but it wasn't actually in Texas. What if the new line Jason made Pamela more supernatural like the Elm Street movies? I would be fine with that. To me, I've always felt like the Friday the 13th movies, while Jason is a hot commodity in the Friday the 13th films, I don't think Jason should be always tied to them. Because Jason wasn't in the first one, and that was okay. The idea of Friday the 13th is loss and vengeance. That's the whole idea. That was the story behind Pamela. That was the story behind Jason. That was the story behind Roy. And that's something that should be continued on. My thing is, eventually you do have to move on from Jason because the escalation of the character is going to eventually make him godlike. And ultimately, it's going to make it so unbelievable. Like in Jason X, if we do consider all the New Line films canon, and Jason X is the cyborg Jason, what camp counselor do you know is prepared for that? There's not enough whittling of wood and campfire stories and fucking bear traps that is going to combat that. And if they do somehow beat it, I'm not going to buy it. There's no way. I can buy Chris Higgins hurting Jason the way she did. I could buy Trish Jarvis and Tommy Jarvis hurting Jason the way they did. I can buy Tommy, Reggie, and Pam hurting Roy the way they did. Alice hurting Pamela the way she did. But once we get to part 6, part 7, where we now have to bring in other supernatural characters in order to take Jason out, Freddy versus Jason, another supernatural character to fight Jason, it now becomes godlike, and it does not work well. Like, you gotta kind of scale things back down to maybe, I guess you could say, balance things a bit, because you don't want your killer up here and your final person down here, and the only way they can get up to here is turning into an android. There's no reason you should do that. Why, Anthony? I told you why. It just demeans the character. Gabe says he's the ghost of Crystal Lake, a revived spirit perpetually stuck in vengeance and anger after his mother's death. It's the perfect ghost story, which is why it sucks so bad he's taken it. Exactly. That's exactly my point, Gabe. Somebody pitched Jason versus the Nazis, and that would have bombed terribly. That he has no business being with that whole ordeal. Do I think Jason practiced archery on the archery range in the remake? I think he practiced it. I don't know if it was an archery range, but I do know with him living in the woods for as long as he did, he would have had to adapt it to survival. And archery would have probably been one of them because he was probably hunting random animals in the woods. What's going on, Pugster? How you doing? Where have I been? I've been right here. Where have you been? We've been playing Dead by Daylight. We played some Predator and everything, man. We've been waiting for you. Oh, that would have been pretty cool too, Robert. Oh, thank you, Puxton. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a little cold in this room, so I had to put on the jacket a bit. I do glad you like my little dragon eye. Jason X equals infinity. Counselors equals big old goose. Pretty much, Matthew. Yeah. Anthony says, how you gonna tell me Jason can't go to Texas? Because it wouldn't make any sense. It honestly would not make sense unless you got agents coming there that can overpower Jason and they're taking him to Texas for some random trial or some kind of government facility built to hold Jason. It does not make any kind of sense to take him to Texas. It didn't make sense to take him to New York. It sure as hell didn't make sense to take him into space or Earth 2 at the end of Jason X. So it's definitely not going to make sense to take him to Texas. Oh, I see Carlos. Oh, did I already say hi, Carlos? Well, hello again if I didn't say it. Sorry, the memory's not all there. What's going on, Hostile Graveyard? Ever notice that death has a tendency to correct Jason's anatomical anomalies and endow dude with a rot instead? It's actually very true. Now that I think about it, you're actually very, very spot on. What about Jason versus Ernest? I mean, if the dude that played Ernest was still alive, that would be a funny, like, short kind of film. Not an actual movie. That'd be terrible. But a short kind of film, skit kind of thing would be pretty funny. Devin says, you know, I thought about a character that could connect all the horror movie characters, like this detective guy, who's kind of a bad guy, who has some of the information on the killers. Sort of the connective tissue, like where you have all these films going on, all in their own little kind of spaces in the same world, but you have this one guy that's keeping files on all of them. That's okay connective tissue. It's once you try to, like, well, look at this, look at this, look at this, and that's when things get a little bit not good. Can Jason fart? I mean, if he could, that's probably one of the worst kills in his arsenal. Hey, they didn't have that back in the 80s, Machete. So, I mean, we don't know that for certain. He hasn't been tested. Yeah, Michael eats dogs too, so it's a possibility. Michael still eats dogs. Well, I mean, did he eat? I don't think he ate any animals in 2018. I have to put a pin in that till Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends comes out. The biggest question we should all ask is, why do people settle around this lake? There can't be any money in that, right? I think prior to the Pamela murders, there were likely likely big money as far as like summer homes and stuff like that. After the Pamela murders, you may have saw a regression in that, but probably not by much, especially over the 5-year time period. But after the Jason murders, from Packanack to the Jarvis residence in Higgins Haven, that property should have fucking dove down. So then it's like, well, I guess that's probably why they were able to change the name to it, Part 6. We don't know exactly where Pinehurst is, as far as in close proximity to the lake. So we can't really use that. But as far as Part 7, the Shepherd house and stuff, I guess it's the Shepherd house. Like, when they bought it, that would have had to have been on the cheap. They probably bought it because of how cheap it was. Like, the people buying the Amityville house over and over and over again. Even though things tend to keep repeating themselves over and over. Oh, sure, Paris. Once I get to the share portion, which is probably going to be coming up here soon, I'm going to share your Jason X video, and then I will also do the actual cosplay share. I meant to do that early on, but we dove into it, and it was some good talking. Anthony says Blumhouse didn't want Halloween to pick up after Halloween Resurrection. That was pretty evident with how Halloween 2018 kind of went. Not to mention Halloween Resurrection was terrible on returns as far as money. Slasher X-Files. That would be actually not bad of a concept. Did Jason eat the cat at the beginning of Part 2? I know Muffin he ate, but I didn't know he ate the cat. Ethan says, I hate how Jason is scared of water in Freddy vs. Jason. That's so dumb. I completely agree. Completely agree. It made no sense at all. What's going on, Gummyzilla? How you doing? Man, that sucks, Matthew. That sucks. I know my cell phone signal, and I got a 5G phone. Like, I mean, 5G phone, Galaxy S10e, and I go up my kitchen and I lose signal all the time. It's very fucking weird. I mean, most people want H9, but most people don't pay attention to, honestly, there's no H7 and H8. Because H2O and Resurrection are, by all means, a new Halloween 3 and 4. So to make an H9, you would have to backtrack and actually connect H2O and Resurrection to the first 6 films. And even then, you still have the whole thing of Halloween 3 not really being connected to any of them. So is it really an H9? Or are we just going with the 9th of the... You can't even say the original series. Because H2O is a reboot. Alright, let me jump over here real quick. Oh shit. It looks like, Paris, I'm going to have to jump over to your channel to show it, because I thought I still had it on my thing here. Yeah, that's a definitely good way to look at that, Tyrone. Jason's true fear was being taken away from his mother dying at a young age. That's very true. I mean, if that was the case, Matthew, and he had a subconscious fear when he's walking into the water, because I mean, you have a self-conscious fear of fucking. If you have a self-conscious fear, let's say of subconscious fear of spiders and everything, what? Like you may see a spider and it crawls on you, jump back, but then you're willing to, I guess, kill it if you deem so possible. But you have a subconscious fear of like things like bugs or something like that, spiders, bugs, and everything. You can still kill those kind of things, even though you have a subconscious fear of them touching you. That's one thing. But for Jason to have the subconscious fear to tremble and be disabilitated in the dream world by water, and ultimately when we go back to part 6, when he sees Tommy in the middle of water without hesitation, just going into the water, and all the kills that he does in the water without hesitation, that's the thing that gets me. There's no hesitation in anything that has to do with water, ever, until Freddy versus Jason. Subconscious or not, if you have a deep down fear of that, you are a bit hesitant of going forward. Jason had no hesitation in part 6 going after Tommy. Make sure you pay those damn royalties. Well, I mean, sorry, I might have ad blocker on, so you might not get any royalty from it. Anthony says H2O is not a reboot to me. How so? Because everything else that we get in H2O screams reboot. Because there's no indication of anything happening from Halloween 4, 5, and 6 ever happening in H2O. The detectives, even though the town that Marion Chambers gets killed in is supposed to be in close proximity to Haddonfield, they're going to call over there. They don't know that Michael Myers has been cited multiple times since part 2, but they only reference part 2. And then in Halloween Resurrection, the clown that pretty much knows everything about serial killers only references the events of Halloween 1 and 2, never mentions anything from 4, 5, and 6, but also mentions H2O. That seems pretty damning evidence that 4, 5, and 6 do not exist in the H2O timeline. Alright, let me see here. Oh, there's my Google Chrome. Let me jump over to my game mode real quick so that way I can put this up. Why is my Google Chrome not coming up? There we go. Alright, we're gonna take a look at Paris's Jason X costume. Which, Paris, you kind of double dipping here, man. You get 2 costumes shown at once. Well, not once, but 2 costumes shown in one night. I do like how that turned out, though. The music and the Jason sound effect adding to it. That's really awesome. I like how I was able to put all that together for you. And kinda says Jason has hair in Jason X. It kinda works for you not to have a hood on. All right, not gonna lie, Paris, I did kind of steal that song for the cosplay share video. So not only do you get your Jason X video shown with that song, but you also get your cosplay share Ash video, well, not a video, but picture shared with it as well. But I love that. I love how that turned out. But definitely, yeah, if you guys want to see more of Paris's, more of his Jason mask builds or any videos that I may edit for him, definitely head over there, subscribe, get all that goodness. But I guess at this point, if you guys aren't too burnt out on the cosplay aspect of things, how about I take a brief intermission while you guys watch the share video. And I will be right back after the share video. So, oh, here we go. I keep hitting that button way too early. All right. And that is the cosplay share video, which members got to see early. Which I believe I dropped that on what, like Saturday? It's like Saturday, Sunday? I dropped that early? Which probably is something I'm going to start doing for members when I do Dark Theories videos. They'll be dropped a couple days early for members, and then they will go live for everyone else on a specific day and time frame. So just something that you guys, because I did have early access to videos as the tier 2. I now dropped that down to tier 1. So if you guys want to join up, make sure you hit that join button down below. Hostile says, so what's the rationale behind Jason's appearance in Mortal Kombat X? You know, the one that resembles Bruce Willis. I'm not entirely certain, to be completely honest. I didn't really look at the lore of Jason in Mortal Kombat. But, I mean, it was cool to have him on there. I just wish they would have probably given him a better design than what we got. Because he looked very generic to me. Still waiting on that fleshy hole emoji. I mean, I could probably add one on Discord now that I know how to do it. But I'm still waiting for more members to join so I can add it into the channel emojis. I mean, Scissors was in the opening of H2O. That doesn't necessarily make it canon to Halloween 4. I mean, scissors are scissors. It's not like Loomis would have, evidence of a potential crime or anything like that. Loomis was retired at that point. Because, I mean, let's say we look at it like this. We know where Loomis was living in Halloween 6. When he dies, we know where he's living. Marion Chambers was taking care of him, according to what we know in Halloween H2O. Where was Marion Chambers during the entire course of events of Halloween 6? And pretty much the way they say Loomis dies is just like nonchalant. Oh, he died. Okay, he died in a hospital where Michael Myers had killed multiple doctors. They have evidence that Michael was there. His mask was there. They have so much shit that we should know that Michael Myers exists. In the events of 4 and 5, there are multiple witnesses to Michael Myers being there. But then we go to H2O. Nobody ever discovered his body since part 2. And Loomis only died a couple years ago. It's like kind of passing. Like, there's no way you're going to tell me that 4, 5, and 6 is canon to H2O. There's just not enough evidence to suggest it. And then knowing that Jamie Lee Curtis specifically was not coming into a film where 4, 5, and 6 were canon kind of puts the nail in the coffin. And the incredible lack of information of Jamie Lloyd ever existing, where it's pretty much knowledge that she's related to Michael Myers. That there's no ever mention of it, especially when Jamie Lee Curtis, but Laurie Strode is talking to her boyfriend at that time. She never mentions, yeah, I gave up a daughter for adoption. Mentions everything else. I faked my death. My brother's a psychopathic killer. I'm in hiding and so forth. Oh, but what about that daughter you gave up? Never a mention. Wasn't important. What? She just died like a couple years ago. Not important. Michael Myers is gone. He might come back at some time, but he's gone. Oh, thank you, Young Wrist. How you doing over on Twitch, my friend? I'm glad you loved the music, Matthew. I loved it when I put it up for Paris's video. I was like, I need a new song for the next cosplay share. Why not? Let's throw that up. Yeah, that's my thing. Why would Laurie abandon Jamie? That makes no sense. She abandoned Jamie, but she held on to John. And she's not with either one of the fathers, apparently. So what made one more special than the other? It makes no sense. Just because we got on the topic with Anthony, Devin. But before I begin heading out, you guys got any other questions at all that you would want to ask, or possible potential theories that you would want to see done with Friday the 13th? I'm all ears. Yeah, I agree, Tyrone. Like, I personally felt like the way it should have went was in Jason X. is that that's funny, young Riz. Jason's mom is a cunt. I could have kicked that bitch in the balls. The way it should have went was if Jason would have, I guess, gotten a hold of a living Voorhees, he should have went back to his pre-dead form, which would have been closer to like maybe part 3 or part 4, just undamaged. That should have been how he ultimately looked when that happened. And he should have essentially became a more demonic form if he would have went into a dead body. That would have been preferable. The hockey mask should have never came back, because it makes no sense that going into your sister's vagina, for lack of a better term, going into your sister's vagina creates not only the tattered clothes that you wore when you blew up, but it created a hockey mask. What resources inside your sister's vagina creates a hockey mask? I do not know. I do not want to know. But I feel sorry for... I remember them saying the actress that played Jason's sister, when she saw that scene and how violated she felt, I remember just picturing that in my head. I'm glad you enjoy yourself, Matthew. Which, I mean, I've been wanting to do a Friday the 13th Let's Talk for a while. I was kind of building up to it. I mean, luckily I built up to it to this point now, to where the mic isn't cutting out, or... Because the Halloween one was terrible. Because, I mean, we got some good talking in. We did veer off and start talking about Friday the 13th, which is funny, because this is about Friday the 13th, and we're veering off a little bit here and there talking about Halloween. But the mic cut out, the internet fucked up, where we had to do 2 separate kind of videos, which you can find on the channel. The Resident Evil one veered more into Friday the 13th, so I was like, no, fuck it, let's make this next Let's Talk about Friday the 13th. I may turn it into a weekly thing, because I feel like there's so much to talk about Friday the 13th that I could go every week and do a Let's Talk Friday the 13th. This could be episode 1. We could do episode 2 next week, or maybe the week after that, because, I mean, like I said, I'm not really expected to go back to work until maybe late June, early July, so you guys got a whole lot of time with me. Would I have Paul be one of the final people to die if they have him come back as a bad guy? There's multiple ways you could do that. Maybe one of the final people, you could have him be one of the first. Or you could have it almost a very cliche kind of thing, where he comes, he opens the camp, but he's too scared to stay there. So he leaves, everyone gets killed, because you never hardly see a movie where everyone dies. The final girl lives or something like that. I would have it where everyone dies, Paul comes back, finds all the bodies, goes to call the cops, and ultimately gets killed by a ghost version of Jason. And Paul acknowledging that he was working with Jason. Sort of like how Danny Trejo was in Halloween, in Rob Zombie's Halloween, where he's like, I was good to you, Mikey. And giving that kind of thing, like, I did everything for you, Jason. Pleading for his life, and Jason still kills him. That would be kind of better. I don't know, Devin. I think I figured out the mic. I think, because it hasn't cut out on me in the last couple of streams, playing Dead by Daylight and everything else. The moment I have to unplug this fucker, though, for any reason, I bet that's going to go away for a long time. So don't jinx me, Devin. Don't you jinx me. Just dab it away. Oh, that would be an interesting concept for a video, Matthew. Do my own timeline. I know some other channels, like that the Friday the 13th Network has done a timeline where everything they used as canon. But I could probably do a Paramount one, and I could probably do another New Line one, judging by the possible changes between the Paramount and New Line timelines. That'd be an interesting video. How would a Survivors reunion movie work to stop Jason permanently? Ultimately, it would have to be something where they figure out that fighting Jason head on is not the way to beat Jason. The best way to beat Jason is to give him what he wants. And ultimately, what Jason wants is to be reunited with his mother. In my eyes. Jason's whole thing was, like, when he created the shrine to his mother, as Jenny says, he's waiting for her resurrection. But now, if you take Tom Matthews into account, like how he viewed Jason, which is very interesting in itself. Like in part 6, Jason is pissed because he was dead. He was reunited with his mother in the afterlife. He was where he wanted to be. But Tommy came along and woke him up. And now he's pissed because he's no longer dead like he wants to be. He wants to be back with his mother. The only thing that kind of contradicts that is then how do you explain the hallucinations that Tommy has up until he brings Jason back? Because we know in part 6, Tommy has no hallucinations at all after Jason's resurrected. There's not one hallucination that he has, which seems to indicate that the ghost of Jason was goading Tommy into bringing him back, coming to Jason's grave, and ultimately fucking with Jason to create the right circumstances in which Jason could get resurrected. That would be the only kind of contradiction there. Yeah, I remember you were saying a lot about the Eric Morse novels, Tyrone. Which, see, the thing is with like novels like that, which I mean, I'm sure they're great reads. I'm sure they're very, very interesting. The thing that bugs the fuck out of me with a lot of these killers is that everyone puts an emphasis on the mask that they wear, never considering how lame it is that they got the mask in the first place. There's nothing supernatural about Jason's hockey mask. His sack mask would be more considered supernatural than his hockey mask, because his sack mask, you would think, is far more relevant to Jason than the hockey mask is. The hockey mask was just a means to an end. Like, he found it better. He wasn't wearing a mask at the time. Saul Shelley took it from him. Just because that is the case doesn't necessarily mean someone else putting on Jason's hockey mask gives him the power of Jason. That's ridiculous. Freddy's glove, on the other hand, that holds a different story because Freddy built that by hand. It was Freddy's murder weapon while he was alive. And then, as a supernatural killer. So something like Freddy's glove, you could kind of argue that sense, especially if it's ever pulled out of the dream world. You could definitely argue that because it's a supernatural weapon at that point. Michael Myers' mask, as far as we know, he stole it from a hardware store, which that is debated as well. That is a debate as well. I don't think Michael Myers got it from the hardware store, but that's a video to come, maybe in another Let's Talk About Halloween. But the incredibly mundane ways that they get these items and how writers go on to make them more important than what they are. At that point, I found Jason's shirt. I wore Jason's shirt, and now I kill people. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's only iconic because it's an iconic thing that people remember by. But it shouldn't be like Jim Carrey putting on Loki's mask kind of thing in The Mask. Like, it's not anything like that, and it shouldn't be held anything like that. Jason's not storing souls in the hockey mask. Therefore, it should not hold any supernatural properties. At least in my opinion, it shouldn't. Machete says, juiciest final girl to me, Megan from part 6. You're not alone on that, Machete. Ty would greatly agree with you on that one. To me, Jenny. Jenny now, Jenny tomorrow, Jenny forever. For me. Oh, thank you, Matthew. Thank you. Exactly, Matthew. Why would Jason do the haunting if he was happy with his mother? Which would indicate that Tommy is completely fucking crazy. That would be the indication. But I don't buy that because the hallucinations that he's having stops once he brings Jason's body back to life. You know it, Gabe. You know it. See, I said I haven't read any of those novels at all, and I know the 80s Slasher Librarian has a good portion of it, if not all of them, up on his channel. Which, if you guys haven't headed over there yet to check those out, be sure to do so. Dude has a ton of awesome videos. I just haven't had a chance to really dive into all of them, like any of them at all. I haven't had a lot of the time between TV shows that I'm watching, and then by the time I realize to actually listen to any of them, I kind of find something else that I have to do as far as like a new video, or I'm getting ready to stream or anything like that. But I don't know, maybe one day we'd do a watch party and listen to some of his book readings. Why does my finger smell like a fleshy hole? What you do in your own spare time, Bugster, is completely your business. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. I still love seeing all of those fucking emojis up there. I can't wait to get like more members in so I can add more. He's currently reading Freddy's Revenge and Child's Play 3. Oh, nice. I didn't know they had a novelization of Part 2 for Freddy's Revenge. I did just watch that documentary, Scream Queen, with the guy that played Jesse. I forget his name, but it's a pretty good documentary. Not as good as most, but still pretty good. Pretty interesting. Especially just how shitty his life was, given the circumstances in Hollywood in the 80s. Really good though. Like, I mean, like I said, not as good as some of the other documentaries like Kane Hodder's or anything like that, but definitely check it out. Anthony says, why did they cancel Freddy vs. Jason 2? Ultimately because they wanted the rights to essentially Ash. Sam Raimi was all for it, from what I remember. He was all for getting the rights to Ash to use in Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash for the movie. Ultimately, they couldn't come to a deal to, I guess, how the character was going to be portrayed. If I remember right, it was either money or how the character was going to be portrayed. And ultimately, Sam Raimi pulled out. Because of that, that kind of sort of just deflated all steam that the movie had of being made. And then I guess the overall production of the movie for the first one, as time went on, it doesn't age well. because it's very slapstick and cartoony. The shit that they did to Kane Hodder going into that was massive fan backlash. They ultimately felt that it was now time. At that point, they put so much time in wanting to do Freddy vs. Jason 2 or Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash that now they had to start over because Robert Englund wasn't really looking to get back into the role. They already shit on Kane Hodder. So now they had, and Ken Kurtzinger was not praised as Jason, to say the least. So they had to go back to the drawing board, start over, but they still had a fairly decent story with Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash that they wanted to run with that they ended up turning into comic book form. The sad thing is, though, as interesting as that movie would have been, if it would have, or the comic was, if it was made into a movie, you talk about fucked continuity, that movie would have fucked it with a spiked dildo. Like, literally. For those vids, what channel? 80s Slasher Librarian. Just do a Google, not Google search, but YouTube search on that. It should pop up. Is there any update on the Friday the 13th lawsuit? Last I heard, they had oral arguments on the Friday the 13th lawsuit, and I listened to the oral arguments, and it sounds like Victor Miller, judging by what I've heard, the courts could rule in any kind of way that they want, but judging by what I heard and how the court reacted to Sean Cunningham's side, it looks like the rights are going to stay exactly where they are right now, with Victor owning his part of Friday the 13th. Almost everything in the first script, Jason, Pamela, Camp Crystal Lake, and so forth. And Sean's going to own the Friday the 13th name, the look of Jason, and so forth from there. Judging by what I heard. So at the end of that oral argument, for those that didn't listen, they're trying, Sean's side is trying to get this either back to, I think is another circuit court, to try to take it to trial again, or if this court rules on it, I think they're going to try to appeal it again and try to get it taken to the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court I don't think is going to listen to it at all. It might, but I don't think it's going to listen to it. And I think they know if the Supreme Court gets a hold of it, it's likely going to stay where it is. No, Tyrone, from what I understand, it wasn't that they didn't want their characters to lose to Ash, because as far as Freddy and Jason goes, you can chop them up, blow them up as we've seen, and they can always come back. But I think it was either a money issue, or they didn't want, or Sam didn't want Ash portrayed a certain way that the story was going to take it. Like, he didn't like the story, from what I understand. But ultimately, having a character like Ash in the story, you would have to have the two big bad guys lose to him in some kind of way. Exactly. That was my argument way back when the Jason is a Deadite thing ever came up. Well, not when it ever came up, but when my video, I made that because it was already up when I started doing my video, which Paris did a video on as well. I did, I think, 2 videos on. The thing is like I said, Professor Nobi studied the Book of the Dead, went to an expedition to discover the Book of the Dead, found the Book of the Dead, translated what he thought was passages of the Book of the Dead, which it was passages of it, and accidentally resurrected the Deadite demons that took over his wife and ultimately led to his death. So you mean to tell me that a professor that had extensive training in reading ancient Sumerian, I'm guessing that's what that language is supposed to be, and was trained in all things Book of the Dead, was pretty much an expert, I guess you could probably say. You mean to tell me that Pamela Voorhees was able to do what he could? We're talking about at the time Jason drowned. Like, Pamela would have probably been, what, in her 20s? That a cook at a summer camp, a single mom who's batshit fucking crazy, and was supposedly, according to the Pamela tapes, hearing voices, somehow got a page of the Book of the Dead and not only translated perfectly, but she had the correct passage to do exactly what she wanted, and nobody ever got possessed. Ever. At all. And it just happened to be that one page of the book that brings humans back from the dead, when it's never been depicted anywhere in Evil Dead. We've watched now the 3 Evil Dead films. Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and we are currently in the middle of season 3 of Ash vs. the Evil Dead. We've seen people come back, but only as Deadites. The only exception is Pablo, which you can make an argument that that was due to Ball's deal with Ash, and Ruby made good on it. That you can't even say that's because of timeline shifting, because nothing was changed from the timeline. You can say Ash's hand, but we can also say if Ball's able to bring Pablo back from the dead, then he's likely able to bring Ash's hand back as well. Not Dark Super. Unfortunately, we're not playing any games tonight. We're just talking Friday the 13th. I'm not sure. I'm not too familiar with hack and slash comics. Tyrone? Exactly, Tyrone. Like, literally, everything in the Camp Crystal Lake would be affected by the demons. There would be no way. Now, Pamela was demonically possessed, and it was showed that. Yeah, I'll grant you that. But if we're to believe that Jason drowned, at what point did Pamela use the Book of the Dead? Because we know, according to, I think, what was it, season 2, when they go back in time, it's 1982. 1982, when Professor Noby goes to the cabin and has the Book of the Dead. At what point in time did Pamela get the book? I mean, you could argue there's multiple books, but even if she did, who translated it for her? Did she read it herself? I find that highly unlikely. Now, what would be interesting is if in the Evil Dead world, like we have the Knights of Samaria to combat the Deadites. We have, I don't know, like maybe the Knights of Kandar or something like that to bring forth the Deadites that are very fluent in all things Evil Dead, I guess you could say. And they help Pamela bring back Jason with just the right spell that they need. But again, that also goes to the whole thing. There's never been a point in the canon Evil Dead live action movies and TV show that we see the Necronomicon bring back a human. And if we go with the whole thing, well, Jason's a Deadite. Okay, but then he's not Jason. He's essentially a meat suit. He's a spirit, a Kandarian demon possessing Jason's body. Why the fuck would he make a shrine to Pamela? What sense does that make? Why would he stop attacking Jenny if he's not Jason? He's a Deadite. He's not fucking with Jenny because Jenny doesn't know any. Jason wouldn't react to that. If you had a demonic possessed Jason, it would never occur to him, let me fuck with this person by making her think that I'm Jason and she's like acting like my mom. Let me kneel down so she can try to chop, because then it's like, why the reaction to Pamela's head? It makes no sense. It starts losing all of its steam the more and more you get into it. I'm going to have to check that out. Tyrone, if you actually got links to where I can find those, the hack and slash crossovers that you said, I would definitely want to see those. What's going on, Dragon Lord? What'd you miss? We're just talking some Friday the 13th. Getting into all aspects of everything. Sadly, we are nearing the end of the stream, though. But we do got some really good topics. We got the cosplay share and everything, which I may show that video again at the end of the stream for those that did not see. And easier for me to timestamp to help share to those that are a part of the share. But definitely feel free to check those out, Dragon Lord. That was another one of my arguments, Tyrone. Jason would be talkative. He would, and essentially all the victims that he would kill would also become possessed. That would be my thing. Not to mention, Jason would levitate, floating. He would be doing more mind games with people, not living in a shack in the woods. Oh shit, I just went over to check the stream. We are at 18 likes. Nice, nice, nice. You guys are blowing it the fuck up over here. I like it. Not much, just still talking some Friday the 13th, Gummit. But I don't know, this was really interesting. I like this, talking Friday the 13th because of, I do like to say that I have intimate knowledge of the series because I grew up on it. I've watched those films back and forth. The only thing I'm not knowledgeable of is the TV series, which, doesn't really connect to the movies at all. It's not even in the same universe. But I definitely need to check that out just to check out everything, all aspects of the Friday the 13th franchise. When am I going to play DBD? I was thinking tomorrow. I might play some DBD tomorrow because I'm feeling like I really need to play some. Elm Street discussion next time? Ooh, nice, nice. Tell you what. Next Tuesday, we'll be doing Elm Street. Next Tuesday, we'll be doing Elm Street. And then Saturday, we'll do another maybe Friday the 13th. Actually, you know what? Next Tuesday, we'll do Elm Street. The Tuesday after, we'll do Friday the 13th again. Maybe talking about the final girls of Friday the 13th, like we said. I'm definitely enjoying it. That was my thing, Dragon Lord. I always say it's the death curse. The death curse itself. Because, you want to put emphasis on the death curse because then why have Crazy Ralph talk about it so vehemently? You have to make some kind of thing. And then with the whole thing with Badland, really doubling down on that, I think that's a great way to do it. Well, that was kind of one of the things that I got into Friday the 13th for, Devin, was that our names matched as Jason. So that was definitely a good tipping point. What time tomorrow? I'm thinking probably shoot for around 5 or 6 for some DBD. Yeah, it shares the name and I think the same production company. I think Horror Inc.'s behind that with the TV series. So so there was Jason's before Jason? I think so, yes. I think there were other avatars of the Death Curse prior to Jason. Jason is just the latest avatar of the death curse. And the reason why he is decaying the way he is, the death curse is keeping him alive. And it's restoring him to functioning status until he can do what he needs to do, which ultimately is reuniting with his family. He already did the first part. He already killed the woman that killed his mother. Now it's to the second part where he's trying to reunite with her. The only thing is, Jason is still a man-child. Like, he's not dumb, but he doesn't know what else to do to get through the rest of the death curse. So by the time we pick up in Friday the 13th Part 2, he has the shrine to his mother. He's waiting for her to be resurrected, and he's essentially restless. He wants to be with her. But at the same time, he doesn't know how to be with her. So then when you get like a crazy route that might go through near his area, or the deputy that spots Jason running, and then he sees the kids at Packanack, he's starting to see in his mind, this is an invasion on my territory. They're coming to take my mother from me. I need to be with her. So he takes the offensive and attacks. So 2 is a preemptive attack on Jason's part on people that he thinks is trying to rip him away from his mother. Incidentally, the irony of it is the attack on Packanack is also probably what took him away from his mother. Like, because when people go to his shack, they're likely going to find the severed head of Pamela and take it into evidence, because it's going to be counted among the dead. Or at least, not the new dead bodies, but old ones. And especially if they identified the bodies as Alice and Pamela's head, Pamela probably wouldn't be counted among the overall dead bodies. Oh, thank you, David, for the follow. I greatly appreciate it, my friend, and glad you enjoyed the stream. So, like, by the time we get to Part 3, Jason had to flee from the shack. And it's probably evident to him that now I've lost my mother. So he's trying to hide out, recuperate, wait for things to die down, and then go search for his mother again. Now, when we get to Part 4, he's injured. He may have a concussion. He may have all kinds of injuries that are weakening him. And the only thing he knows is he wants to be with his mother. He has no idea what else is going on, but he keeps going to these places, searching for his mother's head, randomly finds the Jarvis residence, and kills everyone there. He's there, again, preemptively striking against people that he thinks wants to rip him away from his mother. So he's also he's trying to go after his mother's head, and these people are also in the way of that. So he may be doing all these things just to get back to his mother, but even if he gets his mother's head back, he still doesn't know how to reunite with her until Tommy kills him at the end of Part 4. That would be somewhat reuniting. But then at the same time, as we go to the graveyard in Part 6, even though the script was supposed to have Pamela's body next to Jason's, it's not depicted that way. Jason is buried by himself, so he's still not reunited with his mother. So that could also be a reason why Jason's ghost is haunting Tommy. Yeah, he's dead like he wants to be, but he still wants to be reunited with Pamela. But in order to do that, you have to bury them either together, or you have to bury them side by side in order to appease Jason's spirit. The fact that they weren't resulted in Tommy being haunted by Jason, since he was the closest one to him. He was the one that killed him. So why would he haunt Tommy? Because Tommy was the one that killed him in the first place. It would be evident to Jason that, once they reunite me with my mother, he can kill me again. At least that would be my mindset to it. But ultimately, then you take into account the actions of Jason during Part 6, and he did attack Tommy in the water in Part 6. But the whole thing is, Jason is very emotional. He does get angry. Tommy's not doing what Jason wants him to do. So now he's lashing out. And when he says, it's me you want, remember? He's going after Tommy because Tommy didn't fulfill what Jason wanted him to fulfill. So he's like, you know what, fuck it, I'm done. And goes to kill him. Pretty much Tyrone, yeah. Like, he was stuck in a perpetual loop of killing victims at Camp Crystal Lake. That was his hell. Like, he wasn't reunited with his mother at all, which is kind of weird that when Freddy showed up as Pamela, Jason kind of reacted the way he did, just like tilting the head, looking at her, looking at the victim stuck to the tree, and then looking at his mother again. Jason, seeing his mother after so many years, I felt like would have been overcome with emotion. I mean, look in part 2. Like, he questioned it a little bit. But that was with someone that didn't even really look like Pamela. She was just wearing the sweater. You actually got Pamela. Like, a perfect copy of Pamela. Because, I mean, Freddy's power, he copies people. Like, look what he did with Nancy. Like, he was able to copy Donald without any issue and fool Nancy completely. So the whole thing that he could do that to Jason is equally evident. So I would think Jason would be overcome with emotion, and he would probably want to hug Pamela, like right then and there, like to be reunited with his mother. The whole thing, now they did good with Freddy as Pamela yelling at Jason before the first fight. The only thing I felt like Jason would have did, he would have hung his head down, but he would have also dropped to his knees, because the only person he's ever loved now is berating him in such a way that it makes him feel like shit. Putting his head down and then ready to fight directly after that. Like, did Jason just put together that Freddy was impersonating Pamela just because they're wearing a sweater? It's not even the same fucking sweater. So there's a lot of questions I have with that. Hey, Shajonicus. I'm guessing that's how you say that. I want a Pamela prequel so bad. I wouldn't mind one. Based on Pamela's Tale, the comic, if you have not read that, that would be a great prequel. A very great prequel. Or if they wanted to do a Netflix miniseries just based on Pamela Voorhees and going through Pamela's Tale like that, I would like that too. I don't think you could do a TV series, a full-out season-to-season TV series of Friday the 13th, unless you're doing very stretched-out retellings of every single movie, and even then, I would only want the first 4 movies spread out in that sense. But ultimately, I would want a canon version to the Paramount films of Pamela's Tale. That's what I would want. Oh, I will, Matthew. I will. I'll shoot you a message. Funny, Devin. Very funny. Bates Motel, Pamela TV show? Not really, no. Because Bates Motel absolutely butchered the source material. I would want everything from Friday the 13th, part 1 through even 8. Like, give me all the movies as canon, but this is a full-on prequel miniseries of Pamela's Tale leading up to the birth of Jason, how Jason pretty much showing how he progressed as a kid up until he was maybe 11. You could do some time skips there to the point where Jason drowns and Pamela snaps and kills Barry and Claudette. But ultimately, there are some things in Pamela's Tale that you can expand on to still keep it within the realm of possibility that this exists in this world. But I do want it as a young Pamela during her adolescence, to the point where she gets raped by Jason's biological father, to the point where she meets Mr. Voorhees. And ultimately, the last episode should be her killing Barry and Claudette. That's the way I would do it. And I would even use the same footage from the first Friday the 13th film just for that. Because I wouldn't want to recreate it at all. I don't want to recreate anything. I want it to stand with the rest of the series. Honestly, you need to help write the script for a future Friday the 13th film. I mean, I would love to come up with the story, My script writing skills are not that good. I've wrote a couple scripts before by hand. Primarily, it was a. I remember one script I wrote was a Hellraiser and Wishmaster crossover, and ultimately, I can't remember exactly how it went, but it was ultimately where the girl that releases the Wishmaster, as you know, for anybody that has watched Wishmaster, when you release the Wishmaster, the Wishmaster has to, I think, get 1,000 souls. Is it 100 or 1,000? I forget. It's been a while since I watched the movie. But once he attains all of his souls, the Waker of the Wishmaster grants its Waker 3 wishes. And one of those 3 wishes, I had it where she, I made it a main character a girl, because, I mean, that's, at the time, that was all you saw, so I kind of went with it. But I made it where she wished to be in possession of the Lament configuration. And then I made her second wish to make the Wishmaster solve it by hand. And when he solved it by hand, it called upon the Cenobites. And the Cenobites came for the Wishmaster, and that's how I brought them together. Most of the movie was ultimately meant to be a Wishmaster movie, because you didn't really see much of the Cenobites. You saw the main character maybe doing some research on the Kirsty Cotton and Frank and her father and so forth like that, and the events of Hellraiser 2. I scrapped all the events of Hellraiser 3 on. I took away all of that and just went with Hellraiser 1 and 2, and I pretty much used that as a starting element for this crossover with Hellraiser. Tyrone says, how would you do... Oh, wait a minute. We go to Matthew first. Matthew says, he wants his mom so bad. It's actually kind of sad how bad he wants... Exactly. It is sad how bad he wants to be with her. But it is also his driving force. Tyrone says, how would you do the canceled F-13 CW show? I wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. I wouldn't touch Friday the 13th on CW at all. There'd be no way. No way I'm touching Friday the 13th on network TV. None. Cable? Maybe. Sci-fi? Maybe. Not on CW. There's absolutely no way. It's doomed to fail. Because you can't do everything you want. I mean, you can be dark like Supernatural, but all the elements that make up a Friday the 13th movie, like overly gore effects and stuff like that, you can't really do. It's going to be censored to fucking hell. Like, if these movies were going to get NC-17 ratings in the film world, think about on network TV. It'd be doomed. I don't know, Devin. I don't know. Maybe I might work on a new version of my Hellraiser Wishmaster crossover and do it as a potential one day. Jeepers Creepers versus Pumpkinhead would be bad. Definitely. That would be a pretty cool one. Yeah, because like the way I had it in my head was when the Djinn, the Wishmaster, is opening the box by hand, and when the Cenobites start popping out, it's sort of like the Wishmaster is scared. Because it kind of took elements, I guess, from later Wishmaster films where sort of divine weapons can hurt it and kill it. This, I didn't have that. I had it where the Wishmaster could be hurt, but he could not be killed, because I always stuck in my head where he says that which is eternal cannot die. But with the Cenobites, I kind of wanted to make it where eternal suffering, like that which is eternal can suffer eternally. That's what kind of I wanted Pinhead to say to him. That was like how I kind of ended it, because it wasn't a fight by far. Because in the realm of Leviathan and stuff like that, the maze and everything where Pinhead kind of forms around the Wishmaster when he opens the box, the Wishmaster has no power there. He has his immortality, he's still eternal, but he has no power. And he needs that last wish to be taken in order for him to break himself free. So he kind of made himself where he's no longer in the gem that originally released him. He's now in a new prison by the order of the Gash, the Cenobites. And that's how I kind of ended the story. I mean, they are Tyrone, definitely. But the way I did it was because of them being in the realm of Leviathan. In that particular realm, I did want to have it fuck with the Wishmaster's powers. Because, I mean, the Wishmaster itself, because you look at it, when the Wishmaster's inside the gem, that's a different kind of realm. So, if that was the case, if the Wishmaster was still all-powerful, wouldn't he be able to just blink himself right out of the gem? I mean, it's sort of like a spell kind of thing, but I feel like there's certain magical properties about the Lament configuration that ultimately, when it's called upon the Cenobites, they bring their realm to you, and they can take you. Because look at Pinhead with Frank. When he tears apart Frank and he opens and closes the box with all the chains down and everything, it takes everything with him. That was kind of the concept with that. Said, you help me write the script, Matthew? I'd be down for it. I'd be down for it. Sounds like it would be fun. The Wishmaster would be powerful like Dr. Chenard only if Pinhead met him in the actual real world. Let's say Hellraiser 3, where Pinhead isn't bound to the box. He's traveling the streets. If the Wishmaster was to face him on those terms, the Wishmaster would wipe the floor with him. But because the Wishmaster is calling the Cenobites with the box, the Cenobites come. The Cenobites bring their dimension with them in that same room. It renders the Wishmaster weak to where he still can't be killed, but he's now imprisoned by the Cenobites. That was kind of the concept I was going for. Now, the Wishmaster can be freed. He can be brought back. It would have to be someone like Kirsty going into the labyrinth, freeing the Wishmaster and bringing him back into the world. And then it's status quo. He still needs that third wish. But ultimately, that's the way I kind of wanted to play with it, just because I felt like with the magic that was used to place him in the gem, it's kind of the same thing. Because you look at the book, even. When the end of the Hellbound Heart, they're looking at the box as gateways into, I guess you could say, hell. Looking for gateways into hell. And there's multiple boxes across the world, and Kirsty's whole thing is trying to look for her father, who she thinks is trapped in one of these gateways. So that would indicate to me that if the Wishmaster was calling upon the Cenobites with the box, and they came for him and took him, or even just bringing that realm to him, technically you're in the box. Once they close it, you're inside. Like, completely. Like, you're taken off the plane completely. While they're there and the box is open, you're still in that realm because that gateway is now open, which the Wishmaster would be in. But ultimately, the Wishmaster would have to leave the room in order to get out of that situation. That's funny, Machete. I did something similar to that when I was in middle school. I had a report about making my own story, and I ended up writing one about the Grim Reaper. And I took the Reaper concept, and I forget exactly what the story was, but I know it grossed her out a little bit because there was a lot of gore in it. A lot of gore, a lot of murders. They probably looked at me very, very weird, like I probably was going to be one of those kids doing bad things in the 90s in schools. Yeah, Devin, we end up going all over. There should be adult animated slasher movies with the success of Mortal Kombat Legends, Scorpion's Revenge. I tell you what's really fucking dark that I want to see more of. I just watched Justice League Dark, Apocalypse War. I highly recommend it. If anybody, DC fan or not, check out Apocalypse War. That shit is fucking ridiculously dark. Like, we're talking half of the, not even half, I think aside from a few members of the league, everyone's getting ripped apart. Like, it's ridiculous. I mean, full-on animated intestine, like, pulled out. Like, Batgirl, there's like fucking arms flying up, legs and shit like that. Starfire, she's ripped in half, intestines laying all over the ground. It's some shit. It's some shit. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Alright, guys, that's going to do it for me for the night. I'm getting so hungry right now, and there's a pizza with my name on it. But I do want to thank you guys for sticking around so we could talk some Friday the 13th amongst some other horror genres, or horror properties as well. Some genres, because, I mean, some of them I don't consider slashers. But like I said, I will be back on tomorrow. I'm thinking around 5 or 6-ish for some Dead by Daylight. Thursday, we'll be watching another 3 episodes of Ash vs. the Evil Dead. And then Friday, I think we might be playing some Man of Medan. Got a nice little schedule going on. But we do want to thank you guys again for spending so far the night with me. And really, really, really blowing this whole stream up. I'm greatly enjoying it for you guys. For me, you guys are fucking all hanging out. Like, shit. But I'm going to head out. I'm going to play the cosplay share one more time for you guys. And that being said, as always, I am JG Dark. And thanks for watching.